When you're a marketer, you get hit by hundreds of metrics that you could potentially keep track of, but not all of them are useful at all times. Some of them are even completely useless and we call them vanity metrics. So to try to help you figure out which metrics you should give attention to, Mark and I are going to share 10 of the metrics that we think are the most important for our business and how to track them. And spoiler alert, these may not be the ones that you think we track. So let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Authority Hacker podcast. As you know now, we are back to the weekly long format, so this is going to be a long episode, but it's going to be an interesting one. I think that, when I see the amount of time people spend talking about page speed on SEO group versus other metrics, there could be like a Camembert chart where it's like 89% of discussions are page speed for metrics and the rest only gets like 9% or something, or whatever. It's terrible. So I think that it's going to be quite interesting to not talk. There's one metric that we'll talk about page speed, but let's talk about the other metrics as well. But before that, how's it going, Mark?
I was waiting for it. It's such a release when you asked me like how it's going. It's going great, actually. Yeah, fantastic.
I never ask you outside of the podcast as well, so.
Yeah. Like, do you really care? Or?
That's a good way to introduce you without having to think about it and prepare some segue into it. So that's how it works, really. So kind of like my default, like when I meet people, I don't know what to say. I just say, how is it going? And that's usually that. So if you meet me in real life and I say, how's it going? I just had no idea what to say to you that second before. We all have those sentences we use, right? And that's mine. So I just gave away my crypto.
Well, let me turn that around. How are you?
It's getting too hot in Budapest, but at least we're not locked down, so it's pretty good.
When people start when people start deflecting the question and talking about the weather, they really don't know what to say either. So have some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay basically, but I'm really hot right now. Actually, I had to turn the aircon to max power just before, so I hope people don't hear that in the podcast. But that's not the topic of today's podcast, so let's jump onto today's podcast. And actually, I'll let you start, because you're picking up the first few metrics that we're going to be sharing.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about a lot of metrics today, but none of them are as important as this first one, because this is what really defines your business, and that is net profit. So what is net profit? Well, it's the amount of revenue you make, your sales, less your costs, so the cost to produce those sales, minus any expenses or salaries that you have personally. It may sound like Captain Obvious over here telling me to look at my net profit. Businesses obviously exist to make a profit, but they are far, far more important than any kind of vanity metric. And I'm including like top line revenue as a kind of vanity metric, in a way, compared to net profit at least. And anything else we're talking about today, any of the other metrics, we're measuring them, but and they're sort of like part of the chain of events that occur on the way to us making money. A business exists to make profit, and that's what we care about. So you should keep a close eye on it. And the reason I also bring it up is because about 4 and a bit years ago, before we moved to our current bookkeeper, which is a company called Bean Ninjas, we used to have every quarter, we used to send all our receipts, invoices, download all our e-commerce stuff, our PayPal export, and send it over to an accountant, and she would prepare this once per quarter. So 4 times throughout the year, when she sent us that completed report, we would know where our position was and our net profit. And then over the next 3 months, it would get progressively out of date, and we wouldn't really have much clue until we checked in on it again. So now that we have a weekly bookkeeping done in a tool called Xero, which is an online accounting bookkeeping tool, Gael or I or anyone else can log in at any point and just see, okay, how are we doing? How are we progressing this month? And all sorts of interesting things come up when we start like keeping a pulse on your on your net profit. So I would encourage you to at least be doing this monthly, because if you don't know this number, then you really don't know your business very well.
Yeah, I think also it's one of these numbers that this is not the number people share when you talk to them about their business.
Yeah.
So people like to share revenue, but not, which is, we're going to talk about revenue next, but like people never talk about net profit, and it's like especially like e-com people I meet, like, oh my god, I have built this 7-figure business, etc. And it sounds impressive, especially if you're a beginner and you're like, oh my god, this is so great, etc. But the thing is, like, if you buy $1 million of stuff and resell it for $1 million, you have a 7-figure business.
Yeah.
But you have zero profit, and it's like a lot of people kind of like sell themselves at social events for entrepreneurs that way by inflating themselves. And so like net profit is really like how much the money the company is actually making versus how much you have in revenue. So I think it's, especially in case studies, you will see that a lot where people talk about revenues to like inflate that as well. Be very careful. What you're looking for is that metric, which is net profit, which is after tax, not after all tax, but after expenses, most importantly. So if they pay for advertising, if they pay for products, if they pay anything like that, then that's the number you want to be looking at. And it's what tells how profitable an actual business is, you know? Do you want to go for the next one? Because that's yours too.
Yeah, so this next one is revenue and conversion rate per page. So this is really important, especially on larger sites as well, but also on smaller sites, so that you will know what's actually generating the revenue in your business. Quite often, it's a small number of pages or a hub that might be generating a significant proportion of your revenue, and it would make sense to maybe build that hub out further, or create more similar content, or take some learnings from that and kind of apply that further, rather than just scattergun producing all sorts of random pieces of content around your niche. So it's really important to look at this, but it can be also a little bit tricky to actually measure at times. If you're an affiliate, if you're an Amazon affiliate, up until very recently, it was quite easy, because Amazon used to have something called the Content Marketing Report, which if you had the Amazon tag one link or something, it would automatically pull it in, and it would tell you your Amazon revenue per page, and that was really, really useful, because it would pull in everything, not just the product you're recommended, but all the other stuff that people who bought through that link bought as well, and it would tie it back to page level, which is really important. Now, if you want to do this with other affiliate programs, you're going to need to have some kind of sub ID or tracking ID for each page. Most affiliate programs will allow you to do this, so you should just create like a sub ID, which would be ideally just the URL slug, after your domain of that page. That's quite a good way of kind of organizing it. And then if you do that, you can then run off a report at the end of the month, or how often you're looking at it, and you can just tie it back to that page. So you'll see revenue per page in that sense. And Gael, you put something in here about Google Analytics. I don't know much about this, so you're gonna have to help me out here. What do we do here?
Yeah, I mean, you can so like to regress to that, like revenue per page, but you also want to maybe track clicks per page. And sometimes if you don't have tracking IDs, what you can do is you can create events in Google Analytics that allow you to see that in the Google Analytics interface as well, which is nice, because then you can slice it per country, per browser, per traffic source, etc. So it's like it allows you to do that. So adding events to that as well allows you to like essentially go deeper on that. And also if you're selling products, e-commerce tracking will give you that. The problem obviously is that revenue per page is tricky, right? Because of course, if you're looking at like the last page people visited, it's always going to be your checkout page. But it doesn't mean that this is the page that essentially convinced people to buy. And so it is a very deep world, the conversion tracking world. There's like first touch attribution, last touch attribution. There's also decaying attribution depending on time when people touch this. There is assisted attribution. So for example, channels like Instagram, for example, would be an assist channel. Like it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sales unless you're running ads, because there's no links on Instagram. But it could be an assist channel, etc. Same with YouTube videos and so on. So there's a lot of ways to look at that. I know Google Analytics actually supports most of these models, and you can actually see these numbers based on each model. So you can change the model and actually get an idea of that. Obviously, this is for e-commerce and selling your own products, not really for traffic, for affiliate. Affiliate is just like put the traffic TID, and usually it's very simple funnel. So people go on the page, they click on the link, they get to the merchant, and they buy. So you don't have these things. If you're looking for like really big, complicated funnels as well, there's things like Segmetrics, for example, tools like that allow you to build these very complicated reports that allow you to see how each page contributed to the sale, etc. Much deeper than Google Analytics. So yeah, it is a deep world. But if you're running a simple affiliate site, it's just putting a tracking ID and then doing that. We're also checking Affiliate right now as well, which does some of that. We can't give it a recommendation or anything because we just started trying it. But it is a tool that essentially tries to do a lot of that job for you. So it looks pretty interesting.
All right,
take the next one.
Let's go on the next one. Yeah. So the next one is contact growth. So this is relevant if you are running any kind of email list, which you probably should be unless you're like heavy into affiliate and nothing else. And this, it's all very well looking at number of subscribers or something, but when you get to a certain point and you have 70,000 and it goes from like 70,050 to 70,090, it's really hard to see. Like if we look at our active campaign dashboard, it's like a straight line for the whole month, just because like the incremental growth is such a low proportion of the overall growth. So the metrics we look at is the contact growth, so new subscribers per day. And it's really important that you look at this per day, because if there's any kind of fuck up in your opt-in software or just any part of your funnel, this is usually one of the first things that breaks, at least in our experience. It's happened 3 or 4 times. And you will get a very early lead indicator if this number starts going to 0 or dropping significantly for a few days. You can kind of dig into the problem and see, is there a technical issue or something else which is causing this. So it's a really important metric, and I think you really need to watch it like a hawk if you're doing any kind of sales-based, funnel-based email marketing.
Yeah, I mean, you say that because we had our pop-up break for 3 weeks at some point and we didn't notice, we didn't track it properly. Yeah. And that messed up with us. So yeah, these things will happen and that's why we started paying more attention to this, basically. I wanted to put that metric together with active users. So if you are running an affiliate site or something like that, you're not building an email list. I think active users in Google Analytics is essentially the closest metric to that. It's the number of unique people that have interacted with your website in the last 1 day, 7 days, 30 days. At least that's the default views in Analytics. And what it does is it shows the growth of your audience, right? And it shows, it kind of like mixes together engagement with discovery. And it gives you an idea of how many people touch your business. So if you're going to be pushing something, selling something, or if you want to see the growth of your site in search, things like that, usually you need to see that curve go up. When that curve goes down, usually for us, because a lot of our traffic is organic on pretty much most of our sites, it means that our search is doing worse as well. But also it gives us an idea that maybe the stuff we're doing does not engage people that were following us as much. So even if you have an email, this is quite interesting. You can actually follow that metric either in the default analytics dashboard when you open it, or you can go in audience and active users, and you'll find that report here, and you can go more granular and select different durations and things like that and get an idea. Especially if you have a website that's like actually trying to build an audience, this is actually quite powerful. It really gives you an idea of like the size of the audience. And if you run things like retargeting, for example, it's also going to give you an idea of how powerful that's going to be, because these are the people that will be on your retargeting list. So it is an interesting one. It goes together with contact growth, I think. Next one.
Next one's revenue per employee. So this is actually a metric which like Fortune 500 companies use, like big companies use. So Netflix, for example, makes $2.3 million per employee. So it's the total amount of revenue insane, yeah. Divided by the number of employees they have. Quite simple. Amazon, only $300,000. I say only, it's still huge, but $300,000 per employee. Now, what you want to look at with this metric, why it's so important, is typically when you start and it's just you, and things start taking off, you will tend to make very high or a decent amount of money per employee because it's just you. But what can happen if you're not careful is that you start adding a lot of people, but your revenue might go up, but like not significantly so. And you end up spending a lot of staff cost, which is probably going to be one of your most expensive costs for websites. So like content, link building, these kinds of things. You end up spending a lot of money on stuff which isn't moving the needle revenue wise for you, and therefore isn't contributing to your bottom line. So this would be when you go all out on having epic branding and huge maybe support team, or like doing all this kind of unnecessary stuff, which may be cool and adding value, but not necessarily like bringing home the bacon. So I think it's always a good metric to keep an eye on. You don't need to watch this every week, but like just once a quarter when you do your quarterly planning or quarterly meeting, have a look at revenue per employee. If you have a lot of freelance staff, then you can kind of like break that up into two different metrics, or you can sort of combine it all into one. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it gives you an idea of how bloated your company is.
Exactly.
I think that's the way it is. And I think these two, like revenue per employee and profit margins, often correlate. Net profit, because it's like employees tend to be the highest cost for your business. Therefore, the more employees you have and the lower revenue per employee you have, the lower your net profit usually, which is an encouragement to run lean, and that's how we run our stuff, and we're pretty happy about that. What it does as well is it reduces your management overhead, which is also nice. So yeah, we recommend basically running lean companies. We do that very effectively these days, and so as a result, these are the metrics we're looking at. Then we're running into more like IM type metrics. So these were like more high level stuff. Still matters, like the contacts, etc., number of users. But now it's like you regress to like traffic, etc. And that the first one is going to be session and engagement metrics by source, page, and browser. So I've kind of like grouped all of these together, and the metrics you're going to be looking at is time on page. Bounce rate, I'm not a huge fan, because bounce rate on analytics just means nothing. If you spend 6 minutes on the page and go back, or like 2 hours on the page and go back, and only visit one page, it's counted as a bounce by default analytics. So it's just not a good metric initially. But it's like you can still look at it a little bit, but I'm not a fan. If there's a variation on the same page, maybe it's interesting, but otherwise I think it's not very good. But pages per visit, stuff like that, is quite interesting. And so I'm segmenting it. First of all, per traffic source, that's the one everyone does, right? Checking like Google traffic and like your Facebook ads and like your social traffic, etc. What that does is it allows you to see useless sources of traffic, and they happen often. Like for example, a lot of people, apart from monetizing with display ads, don't really manage to make any money from Pinterest, because it can drive a lot of traffic, but the traffic is a lot less engaged and doesn't care that much about you, etc. And so it might look cool in analytics in numbers, but then when you look at engagement metrics, then you realize that even though it looks cool, unless you're running, Mediavine, AdStribe, something like this, it's not exactly the best source of traffic, and you're maybe better focusing on like SEO, even if you only generate half the traffic from SEO, because the engagement is so much higher. And you realize how good of a traffic source SEO is when you actually look at it that way. Then you're going to look at it per page. So I like to like essentially compare how long people spend on a page against the average of a page on my website, but I also like to look at the word count on my page against the time spent. So it's like, let's say I have a 2,000 word article, I like to benchmark it against other 2,000 word articles, because if like I benchmark it against a podcast show note, for example, although podcast is a bad idea because people might play it on the page, but a 500 word article or something, that it makes sense that there would be less time on the 500 word article. It doesn't mean it's worse. So like benchmarking these and essentially understanding if people are actually enjoying the content, finding what they want, etc. And finally, per device. And the reason I check per device is not really per device and per browser. It's not really for engagement, but rather to find broken stuff on the website. And as you know, we have had broken pages on like depreciated versions of Safari. So for example, like someone still has an iPad 2, for example. iPad 2 has not had a new iOS version for maybe like 5 years or something. So it's running a 4 or 5 years old, more than that, like 5 years old Safari or something. And so that version of Safari might actually break your website, while the current version of Safari might just be fine. And as a result, like maybe you lose like 2 or 3% of your traffic, just can't open your page. You get 3-second time on page, and you realize that when you break it down that way. And there's a tool for that called Browser Stack, actually, that you can, if you see these kind of numbers, then you can, I think they have a free trial, so you can go and sign up for that. Or you can have it when you do a site redesign or something, but you can then go and open on that device, on that old version of Safari, your website, and see what it looks like. And very often you'll find these like small pockets of traffic that just don't get a good experience on your site, and you have to go and tweak and fix your CSS or something like that, or fix some JavaScript to make it work. we know it by experience. It's cost us a few times. So that's why you want to look at this per device and browser, etc. as well.
I think that's kind of like a good point as well. So the reason we're looking at all these metrics, well, there's two reasons. On the one hand, we want to make kind of big strategic decisions about the direction we take our business and how it's going and all that. And then on the other hand, you have this kind of like red alert system. If something's broken or terribly wrong, by looking at these metrics, having a dashboard, looking at them, checking them regularly, that will flag problems before it takes you, months or weeks or months otherwise to catch them.
Yeah, I mean, also one thing is like if I see like on the page level, for example, that like the engagement is low, and my main traffic is like search. That's when you look at the angle of your content, the search intent. So like you Google the keyword, you look at what angle the top pages are taking, and you compare it to yours, and then you just do tweaks to like this, the formatting of the article. Maybe the answer needs to be higher up on the page for the exact query, etc. Like these kind of things. It's not only going to boost your rankings, but it's going to also boost engagement. And usually these two kind of like snowball with each other. So yeah, like this is like my bread and butter when I look at analytics really. And to go and find out Google Analytics, you go in behavior, site content, all pages, and then your main metric you can take either landing page, source, or browser, and then the second metric you can just cross with whichever you want. So like you'll be able to find exactly what you want there. So that's your bread and butter for engagement on your site, basically. The next metric is an interesting one as well. This is for the page speed junkies. There's a few of them. I see them on Facebook groups posting their screenshots all the time, so I know they're here. It's the page load speed per country and in Google Analytics, and it's very different from like a speed test on GTmetrix or on Lighthouse or something like that, because what Analytics shows you, it shows you the real load speed for people if they have a slow computer, if they have shit internet, etc. But like it's much like it's the real life version of this, not like a synthetic test on a perfect Google server or whatever. And so what it allows me to see is if my CDN or hosting is doing a good job in every country, and most importantly, in the countries where we have customers, right? So I usually compare that. Like I know more or less like where our customers or sales come from. If you make sales on Amazon US, for example, obviously you're looking at speed in US and so on. And even if your site speed is trash in Venezuela, you don't care that much because it doesn't matter if you're only selling Amazon.com. And so it allows me to check that, and I have changed like CDN solutions, etc. based on that. You can find it in Google Analytics in behavior, site speed, page timing, and then you can choose the main metric to be the country, and then you'll see that. It will show you a graph with how much higher or lower you are than the average page speed per country. And for example, for us, I checked just before this podcast, and we have lower page speed than average in India, Hungary, that's probably me because I'm on that crazy 4G connection, China and Mexico, for example. So these are the countries where we're actually like doing worse. But in the US, for example, we look 50% faster than the average around the world, which helps conversion rate on Authority Hacker. So if you want to see how fast your sites really are for users, it's really cool. And then you can also dig in terms of like, are they on mobile, are they on desktop, etc. And kind of understand that a lot of countries have shit mobile networks, for example, which explains like slower page speed. But like if you check computer page speed, then it'll be fine. And then you can't really do much if they have a bad network, but it will give you an idea of like where to work on page speed. And you can try your CDNs and hostings that way. That's why I, for example, like NitroPack a lot, because like that graph when I installed NitroPack just went from like I'll give you the stats for Toy Hacker. We're at like maybe 10, 15 seconds sometimes on like really big pages. It went down to like 4 or something. It's like the drop was massive, and this is the real page load speed for people, and that was really good. So I recommend you check that one. The next one, it's a pretty classic one, is flagship keyword ranking. So essentially, it's the keyword rankings are like, they're just a benchmark. They're not really important because they only give you your rankings for a given keyword at a given time in a given location. And so your search traffic is not that. Your search traffic comes usually from all around the world. You might even have different rankings based on different states in the US, for example. Your rankings do change multiple times per day very often. And also you rank for many long-term variations of a keyword.
To be fair,
so
though,
really
I do think there's a quite strong correlation between how
it's a benchmark.
how you are reporting in a keyword tool for rankings and the traffic you're getting to the page that keyword is targeting, even from long tail, and just overall how well your site is doing. Where it's most useful for us is like troubleshooting things further down the line. So if you start losing some sales, or losing the new subscribers or something like that, you like regress it back. So like what's my opt-in rate, what's my traffic, and then finally like what's my rankings. And so like we had to experience a couple weeks, like over the last 2 weeks, our traffic on Authority Hacker, it was down like 7% or something like that. And we're like, I wonder what's causing this. If we haven't like lost some rankings, is there something we need to fix, is there something we need to do? But actually when you look at the rankings, it's like they're stable. So it's just okay, maybe a bit seasonality there, or like post corona or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell, but there was a booster on coronavirus, so I can imagine that now, as life's coming back to normal in most countries, then it goes back to normal. But yeah, but like, I agree, like keywords are a good metric, which is why it's in this list. It wouldn't be otherwise, so I think it's a good metric. We use AccuRanker for our rankings. I think we bought it on AppSumo. They run AppSumo sometimes, and it's my favorite rank tracker. We have Ahrefs as well, but the problem with Ahrefs is it doesn't update every day, and it's not the most accurate rank tracker, let's be honest.
Just to sort of like counterpoint there, there are 2 companies in the world that do rank tracking, that do it properly, and every single tool, Ahrefs, SEMrush, like every single one, even AccuRanker's not doing their own rankings; they're buying the rankings from one of these 2 companies.
Yeah, but Ahrefs updates once a week, and then AccuRanker will update when you press the button, for example. So
so that's what we mean by accuracy, like, because it's like it's a while since it last updated, rather than it's giving you the wrong number.
Yeah. We use keyword rankings as well when we do on-page tweaks. So we do these a lot these days, right? We go back to a page, we we'll analyze search intent or something. We'll find out like what Google's using for video snippets, things like that. We'll change that, reindex the page, and then use the rank trackers to see the variation and see whether Google likes what we're doing or not. Like keyword rankings also allow us to see whether we're going in the right direction for that, and for link building campaigns, basically. So it's a feedback for work that we're doing both on page and off page for SEO. The next one I like is click-through rate against position in Webmaster's Console. So basically it gives you an idea of what percentage of users click on your results based on the position you're at, right? Because obviously if you rank number 10, you will get less clicks than if you rank number 2. So it's not like you shouldn't just look at your click-through rate in Search Console, because it's dependent on your position. So I usually divide the two. Obviously it's not a very accurate metric. Why? Because SERP layouts, there's hundreds of them. And so if there's like a carousel on top, or for your query, or if there's all of that, plus also the numbers you see in Search Console are actually global, unless you actually specify a country, which I tend to do a lot these days. I tend to set up like just US or whatever the biggest country we're working in is, because it gives me something that's closer to reality, especially for sales. So I like to do that. I like to look at my clicks rate. What it allows me to do is it allows me to understand how good my my title is, basically. Not just for the rankings, but also for enticing people to click. So an example is we had a blog post that was how to do this or something, but we had 60 items in there. So I changed the title to 60 ways to do this or something. And the click-through rate went up 30% just by doing that. And so looking at that metric, and I don't need to rank higher. Given the same ranking position, I can just get more search traffic. And usually when you get more click-through rate, you tend to rank higher eventually. So I like this metric a lot in terms of optimizing traffic and getting more traffic. Again, that's something that does not require links. One thing that also it helps me with is schema. So for example, a lot of people, I haven't done the test, but a lot of people have done that test with the FAQ schema that was pretty big in 2019, end of 2019. A lot of bloggers talked about this and realized that they get less clicks to their website, for example, because people just read the schema but don't really click to their website. Some people might contradict that. I'd like to hear that, actually. If you want to say that in the comments in YouTube, that'd be interesting. But this is what it allows you to do. It allows you to see how well your schema is working, how well your title tag is working, and you can find it in Webmaster's Console, search performance queries, and then you can tick the 2 boxes, average rankings and CTR, and you'll be able to see these numbers, and that allows us to do a lot of our SEO work that is on page work, basically. And it's an easy gain.
If you're an agency listening to this or an in-house SEO somewhere, I remember back from when Gail and I used to run an agency many years ago. Optimizing click-through rate, it's like one of the quick wins you can do to kind of like prove your worth in a situation. Whereas like doing all the content marketing, link building stuff takes time. So if you need to show someone a quick win, it's a good metric to show them that you've improved and that you can actually demonstrate in less than a month or so.
Yeah, it's one of the easier ways to climb in top 3, top 5 as well without building links. Really, if you get much better engagement and click-through rate, you tend to rank higher eventually. It does take some time. It's not something that will happen tomorrow, but if you maintain that for like a few weeks, then you tend to jump up without building more links, which pays off massively. I think it might help with featured snippets as well. It might, because obviously your title still shows on a featured snippet. Anyway. The last one that I have is actually the impressions per page in Google Webmasters Console. And it's just like the number of impressions in search a URL gets. And I think that's one that's great for new pages or pages you just updated, for example, but your rankings haven't moved yet. So it's kind of like a metric you look at before you get any movement in order to get some feedback on what you're doing or whether it's good or bad. Impressions tend to vary a lot, even if you're not really getting much traffic. Like you will get a lot of impressions before you get any traffic and clicks rate. And that just tells you how favorable or disfavorable Google is towards the changes you've made to your site. And you can get these results pretty quickly after a few days of doing a change to a page or something, even though you're not ranking yet or after releasing a new page or something. So I quite like looking at that for new projects and updated projects. So that's basically the 10 metrics. Anything else to add to this?
Just for the last one, it's really good if this is like your first site and you're like, how long is it going to take me to rank? I'm not getting any traffic. Have a look in Webmasters Console and look at the impressions you're getting, because that's a much earlier lead indicator of progress. And
I'm going to use this as an amazing segue. If you are looking to start your site, you can actually go on autohacker.training.com, and we have a free webinar that you can check out that has a lot of people have liked a lot. I spent 2 hours just showing how we build new sites. So you can check that out. There will be a promotion for the Authority system at the end, but the training is free before that, regardless of whether you buy it or not, and it's pretty good. So go and check it out. And if you enjoyed this episode, one thing you can do as well is you can click on the subscribe button below on YouTube. You can give us a like. If you're listening to the audio podcast, you can go on YouTube and click on the subscribe button as well if you want to, whenever you have time and you're out of the car. And we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next week. Have a good week. Bye.